All right, welcome back in, everybody. We are covering the offensive lines again. We have the last couple of divisions that we're down to. If you missed the other division or if your favorite team isn't here on the AFC East tonight, you can check that out on whatever platform you're watching. You should be able to catch your favorite team. I am Benjamin Parker, joined tonight by Simon Short. Simon, how you doing, man?
I'm good, Ben. I'm pumped. One of the last few divisions we got here, but we're gonna have plenty more stuff coming down the pike, so everyone be ready.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and derail the whole train right now. I
Love it.
The divisions are done, right? I've gone back through and started ranking all of my guys, and I already know I'm going to disappoint some people because the tackle that they have on their team they think is a top 8 guy, and I don't think that, because there are several, at every spot. That's what's going to happen. But when you actually start making these rankings and these lists, you have to put these people somewhere. To quote a friend of mine, and not everybody can be at number 1 or number 5. Anyway, tonight AFC East, right?
Yep. Let's do it, man. I'm excited. This should be fun.
All right. Then again, we'll tell everybody where you can catch us at the end of the video. But let's get started. The Buffalo Bills are going to be first here in the AFC East. Go ahead and lay out what you think the top five starters will be for the Bills.
Yeah, so for the Bills, I think this is pretty easy. I've got from left to right, Deion Dawkins, Roger Saffold, Mitch Morse, Ryan Bates, and then Spencer Brown. Don't really think there's going to be any competitions. They brought in a couple veterans who figure to be coming off the bench, be depth guys, Greg Manx and David Quessenberry. But I think that left to right starters is going to be pretty set in stone from day one.
I was interested to see what you were going to say there, because let's start with Deion Dawkins at left tackle. Really good left tackle. Maybe not one of the top 5, top 8, but he's a lockdown left tackle for sure. Roger Saffold is not as good as he used to be because of age, but he's still a lock-it-in starter at left guard. And then Mitch Morse, and not the best center in the world. I think certainly an upgradable spot, but he'll hold down the fort for you at center. They'll be fine there. And then you get over to right guard and right tackle, which Spencer Brown's only in his second year. And I think you have 2 guys here who I think you would like to see more from. Is that being fair when we talk about Ryan Bates and Spencer Brown on the right side of the line there?
Yeah, well, Ryan Bates is still a bit of a projection. I mean, the guy went undrafted, but has stuck with the team for 3 years, but he's only made 4 starts in those 3 years, and they all came last year. Let me even go back and see where those starts came from. Spot starts, I mean, he had 1 in week 4, and then the last 3 games of the regular season he started. So that one's definitely a projection. I like what he's put on tape thus far, so this is going to be his opportunity to kind of show why he has stuck around this whole time. But if you get a guy that sticks around that long, even if he hasn't gotten a lot of playing time, the coaching staff just loves the guy and is just waiting for an opportunity to come up. And they didn't take an interior offensive lineman in the draft this year, and they did a lot in free agency. Quessenberry has played some guard, I believe, so that could be an option, but I think they're going to give Bates the chance to lose this spot. And then Spencer Brown's a guy I'm a huge fan of. I love that guy. I mean, he's great downhill. He needs to work a little on his anchor because the speed to power can still get him off his feet a little bit. But he's the exact guy you and I have been talking about through this whole project, where just day 2, just find the best offensive lineman that's sitting there, even if you don't need him right away. He started 10 games for them last year, kind of off and on, up and down a little bit throughout the year, but all the tools are there. I really like the mentality he plays with. I think if he's going to be the day 1 right tackle over Quessenberry, then I think you can rock with him all season.
And you mentioned Quessenberry twice now. That's the name I was about to bring up. I'm going to pair Quessenberry with Greg Van Roten, GVR. I think, and I'm interested to see what you think, but I think that if either Ryan Bates at right guard or Spencer Brown at right tackle, if either of those guys falter, and I don't expect Brown to, but if either of those guys falter, because they both still have something to prove on the NFL level, David Quessenberry and Greg Van Roten are both ready to step in, not just because they're experienced, but because they have shown at times that they can play at a good, solid level in the NFL. This isn't just, oh, by the way, this guy started because he had to. We'll get more into Quessenberry here in a second because of his backstory. But Quisenberry and Van Roten both could start for the Bears very easily. They could start for the Texans very easily. They could start for the Seahawks very easily. I mean, there's about 8 to 10 teams who could have used Quisenberry and Van Roten. Why they didn't get them is kind of ridiculous to me. But here they are sitting on the Bills bench, ready to step up and play major time if anything happens to Bates and Brown.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think Quessenberry and Saffold both coming in from Tennessee probably tells you a little bit how they feel, what they want to do with their run game. I mean, this hasn't been a very successful run game the last couple of years. Obviously, the passing attack has been fantastic. The defense has been really good. They might feel like this is the last step. Year 2 for Spencer Brown, 3rd round pick, but knowing Quessenberry's back there, a guy who has blocked for Derrick Henry the last couple of years, probably is going to be a short leash. So I think, and the fact that they got both of those guys from Tennessee, even though Saffold's going to be a lock it down starter, I think, and Quessenberry is going to be fighting for a spot, it shows you the mentality that they're looking for, what they want on the offensive line. And so Quessenberry clearly fits that. And if Brown is shaky coming out of training camp, or Dawkins, has some kind of injury or something like that, but Quessenberry is a guy that could definitely come in right away and make an impact.
A good, decent starting 5. Me personally, I think the way I've graded these players, I think the Bills have more depth at offensive line than any other team I've looked at. And that's just me personally. I already talked about Quisenberry and Van Roten, who I both like as maybe getting, 8 starts in the season if they got to, or run them through the playoffs if you need to, maybe one, not both. But they've also got Ike Botker back there and Greg Mance, who are a step down. These aren't guys you want to see play 8 to 12 games a year. But, maybe 4 games, maybe if you have one injury in the playoffs, both of these guys are capable of stepping in too. And again, not just because they have experience. There's a lot of people in the NFL who have experience, but because they've actually seemed to show that they can hold up at a decent level over a short period of time without being too much of a problem here. So to me, the Bills go 9 deep. As long as Deion Dawkins doesn't get injured, I think that's really the big key. And Saffold to agree, depending on how well he's playing this year. As long as Deion Dawkins is the guy who gets injured, I think you have 4 guys coming in off the bench here who can really contribute in a significant way here. I love the Bills' depth here.
Yeah, it's really strong. And then you talk about, not only do you have guys that can step in and play right away, but you have guys deep on the bench there that if they can make the team or even clear waivers at the end of the preseason and get to the practice squad. Luke Tenuta out of Virginia Tech is a big physical tackle with a lot of experience. Usually when you hear about these guys who are these big, like physical freaks and high athlete guys, you also hear the words like raw and inexperience associated with them. He's an experienced guy from the ACC who has played a lot of left tackle. So that's even a guy that if he doesn't even play for 2 years, but he's a guy that if Deion Dawkins gets, a little bit older or Spencer Brown doesn't work out long term, you could go that direction and feel pretty good.
100% agree. When Luke Tenuta is your basically 10th guy on the offensive line, it's an indication. Again, he's a 6th round pick. So, again, he may be even struggling to get playing time for a lot of teams this year. But if he's your 10th guy, and he is for the Bills at the moment, before training camp kicks in here, that's another indication of the depth here, because on a lot of teams, there are several teams in which the 6th round draft pick may have a chance at starting this year. And there's a whole lot of teams who the 6th round draft pick is going to be somewhere in the 7 or 8 deep mark, but not for the Bills. They go very, very deep here. Before I get your grade on the Bills and my grade on the Bills, I got to tell the David Quisenberry story for those in our audience who don't know it. Quisenberry was drafted, 6-7 years ago now. He's only played about 3 or 4 seasons in the NFL. I think he missed 2 or 3 entire seasons because of lymphoma. And so there were 3 seasons, I think, where he did not play at all. He's bounced around to a couple of different teams. He survived lymphoma. He came back to play NFL football. He's even bounced around some since then, got to play the entire year as a starter last year for the Titans. And I can't remember the year before if he started the whole season or half the season for the Titans. But he held up. This guy played. This is incredible. For him to come back from lymphoma and for him to not even get that many opportunities to start, he held up well as a solid starter last year. And again, he's in that upgradable category if he were your starter. But this guy held up. And just watching a guy like that fight his way back into a very competitive, very competitive league is impressive. Whether or not he starts for the Bills or not this year, Quesenberry definitely one of my favorite guys.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's a fantastic story. I'm glad you definitely mentioned that. Good to get that on there. Shout out to him. Fun story, man. So everyone just kind of keep following it, because if he gets a chance to, if he does get to be on this team and be on the field, and this is a team that's competing for a Super Bowl. So I mean, you talk about a fairy tale story to root for. That's the one, and that's the guy. So we'll be rooting for it. That's for sure.
Totally agree. All right, let's get your grade on this team. To me, it's a mixed bag. I think the starting five is solid, not blow them away good, but solid. But then there's a ton of depth here. So what's your final grade here on the Bills?
I'm finding I'm going to surprise myself, and I think it's going to be more in line with you on this one. I'm going to go with a B. I think this is a good offensive line. As you go left to right, you lose a little bit of confidence. Now, again, Ryan Bates and Spencer Brown are guys I'm projecting to be really good. But the fact that they're next to each other and going to be kind of, 14 starts between the two of them last year, you just have to wait and see. But the depth definitely helps them. But teams I gave B pluses to, I was just going through trying to make sure I'm being consistent. The Kansas City Chiefs, I gave a B plus. The Dallas Cowboys, I gave a B plus. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers, I gave a B plus. I don't think they're quite on that level, but guys, a B is really, really good. It's a well above average offensive line, and pair that with an all-pro type quarterback, MVP type quarterback, and a really good defense. This is the group that can be an offensive line in the Super Bowl for sure. So I think it's a really good group. I think if Brown and Bates step in and step up, it could easily become a B plus to A level group. But I'm going to go with a B right now.
And I'm not far behind you. No surprise here. I was stuck trying to decide if I wanted to go B minus or C plus. And here's why. I love the depth. Again, I think it's the best depth in the NFL in terms of guys who are actually healthy. And I know the Eagles fans are shouting at me right now, and that's fine. But the Eagles have a lot of guys who may or may not even make the field this year. The Bills don't have those guys. The Bills have guys who are healthy and ready to go. They're ready to play right now. And in fact, they have a couple of young guys who are ready to go and play right now. So the depth is fantastic. The starting five is what bothers me just a little bit. And maybe it's just because the rest of the Bills roster is so darn good. You get the offensive line. I love Dawkins. I love Saffold. I like Morse at center. And then when you get the Bates and Brown on the right side, that's where you at least ask the question, how good can these guys be on that right side? I think they'll be fine. But again, it's not a matter of regular season. It's a matter of when you get to the playoffs and you're going up against the prime teams in the AFC, can they hold up? And I think they can, but I still think they have to prove it. So for me, for now, I've got them somewhere in the C plus, B minus category, probably B minus to be more fair, to be honest. So that's it on the Bills. Anything else you want to add for Buffalo?
No, I think we got it.
All right, let's move on to the Patriots then. Give us the starting five for New England.
Oh, it's a little tougher. I mean, really, when you dig into it, it makes some sense, but it's definitely a bit of a curveball here. So left to right, you got Isaiah Wynn, Cole Strange, David Andrews, Mike Onwenu, and Trent Brown. Obviously, your tackles and center are holdovers from last year. Your guards are brand new with Shaq Mason and Ted Karras headed out the door. But two guys that it seems like this group is very confident in. Onwenu started 8 games for them last year. I don't think they trade Shaq Mason and let Ted Karras walk unless they really felt confident in him. And Cole Strange was the big surprise of the draft, right? I mean, we did the immediate reaction draft show after the first round, and we had Sean McVay up there in interviews saying we thought we could get him in the 3rd round. So this is going to be one of those. I think Cole Strange is going to be the straw that broke the camel's back one way or another, and it's going to be, okay, no, Bill Belichick has lost his touch, or it's going to be he never lost his touch. He fooled all of us this whole time. Whatever. Like one of those two things is going to happen with Cole Strange. I know how you feel about the Patriots. Like you're probably betting on this team is going to figure it out, and if they picked them, it probably makes sense. I have some reservations. I might be the Steelers biasing me a little bit. I'll admit it, but we'll just wait and see. We'll wait. I mean, there's something about him, I guess. So left to right, that's where it's at, because I don't see any major really competitions when you look at, the rest of this group, the depth behind them. But left to right, Wynn, Strange, Andrews, Onwenu, and Trent Brown.
I agree. So, and we'll talk about the depth in a second. I don't want to mix waters too much here for a second. But I like the starting five. You have Trent Brown at the one tackle spot. He's not great. Brown, for me personally, Brown isn't going to be anywhere near my top 10 on the list of tackles. I've got too many other guys ahead of him, but he'll hold down that position. Good, solid starter. You got Isaiah Wynn at the other spot. Isaiah Wynn, again, probably even better than Brown. I think Wynn could be looking at Pro Bowls here, and again, I didn't check to see if he made Pro Bowls because I don't really like the Pro Bowl list, the voting. But Wynn could be making Pro Bowls. He's that kind of talented. And then you've got the guards. So with Onwenu, I really like Onwenu. He's an above average starter for sure, a real difference maker. David Andrews is up and down, but I love David Andrews at center. Even when he's down, he still plays pretty well. And then you have the question mark Cole Strange there at left guard. There's so many other good players around Cole Strange. I figure they'll be fine. How good will Strange be in the long run? We'll find out. But I like this starting five. This is a good starting five. And you mentioned they let go of Shaq Mason and they let go of Karras. One reason they've done this for years. One reason they can do it is because they keep drafting offensive linemen. They keep drafting them and teaching them, drafting them and teaching them. And then when it's time for one of them to make big money, they can allow these guys to go or they can trade them. And because they have other guys lined up to take their spots. So
yeah.
They're not hurting on the offensive line.
And they're the kings of would rather be 1 year early than 1 year late. That's Bill Belichick's motto. No matter the position, no matter the player, no matter how long they've been there, I'd rather be out on a guy 1 year early when he maybe still has something a little left in the tank versus I held on for too long. That's why you see so many guys leave New England, like Trent Brown, coincidentally, leave New England because Bill Belichick's like, I don't think you'll be as good at 27 as you were at 26. And Trent Brown's case, he made big money to go to the Raiders. He did not look as good in a Raiders jersey as he does in a Patriots jersey, and he came back. So, and now again, we're talking about him as a above average tackle. So it is the magic with New England. So, I mean, you could even see some signs with Shaq Mason and Ted Karras last year, whereas they're starting to lose a step. They're not quite holding that anchor the way they were. And if you start showing some signs like that, it's old Yeller, unfortunately, in New England.
It is. And now I could spend all night talking about building a roster just as much as I like talking about the offensive line. Bill Parcells, I think back in the 90s, told everybody, he said, I'd rather get rid of, when he was with the Giants, actually, so this is even early 90s, he said, I'd rather get rid of a guy a year early than keep him a year too late. And so they would, but that was usually for age and injuries. With the Patriots these days, it can often be, you mentioned the age, it's often for money reasons too. They would rather trade a guy when they still have another good year left on a rookie deal and get something back for him than they would to keep him for that extra season and then watch him walk away and they get nothing but, maybe a pick out of free agency, basically. So they are the masters of doing that. It's something I really believe in as well. The Patriots have been doing it for quite a long time. So we get to the depth here. Now, for me personally, I think the Patriots are the opposite of the Bills. I think the Bills have a solid starting five and fantastic depth. I think the Patriots have one of the better starting fives in football and some of the worst depth that I've seen, which surprised me. I expected to see a couple of guys here. I don't see it. I think maybe Justin Herron, maybe as your swing tackle, is probably the best guy on the bench. After that, you're talking a bunch of young guys who have proven nothing and weren't drafted very high. Do you see anything different here on the depth side of things for the Patriots?
No. I'm going back through some of these picks here. Let's see who's so. Is Will Sherman even still on this team? This is where we're at. We're talking about Will Sherman. I mean, Onwenu was the last offensive lineman taken in 2020, 6th rounder. Obviously, he's probably going to be starting. Yadni Kahuste was a draft pick. He was a 3rd round pick. And yeah, then you get back into 2018. So yeah, it's been a while since a big name, since a good, day 2 pick has been really hit on. It seems like now maybe that's just because we haven't had to see too many of them on the field just yet. Like you said, Heron is that swing tackle. He started 10 games in the last 2 years. I'm going to plant my flag and say, watch out for Andrew Stuber. I forget if they got him in the 6th or 7th round in the draft. And Michigan man, really good run blocking tackle. Not the best footwork, not the best foot speed. So he might end up being more of a guard at the NFL level, which sounds just like, based on that description, he's probably going to start for the Patriots for 12 years now, right? Like
Right.
one of Strange or Onwenu aren't going to work out. And Stuber is going to step in. 7th round pick out of Michigan, like big tackle that wasn't fast enough to play tackle in the NFL. So now he's, our right guard, and he's amazing. So that's the name I'm looking out for. And even Chasen Hines from LSU, he was their 6th round pick. If you can get those offensive linemen that have played the big time football, that's late on day 3, that's a great place to start. If that's the only investment you can make, the only time you could take an offensive lineman, just go get one of those guys that played the big boys and just see how that works out, because they're at least used to hitting against big defensive linemen, playing in front of big crowds. They're not going to necessarily get rattled, miss the calls, have too many penalties, stuff like that. So maybe one of these guys, maybe this is the year one of these draft picks kind of steps up as a, wow, he started 6 games in the middle of the season and they didn't miss a beat kind of thing. So we'll just wait and see. But Stuber is especially the guy I'm looking for.
You expect it to happen, right? With Stuber, maybe with Hines, maybe Justin Heron steps in, and I don't see Heron being a long-term starter. Maybe he steps in and plays decent. But the Patriots are the masters. I get tired of bragging on the Patriots because I'm not a Patriots fan at all. But they just do so many things that make sense. And one of those things is that they draft, 2 offensive linemen almost every offseason, almost every one. They might be lower rounds. They might be 5s, 6s, and 7s. And then about every other year, every third year, they'll move up to the 1st, 2nd round and draft an offensive lineman there. They have a great pipeline of talent coming through on the offensive line level, and they teach them probably as much, if not more than any other team in the NFL. They teach these guys technique. And so that even if they're, they can go to some other team and they may not look as good, but the Patriots have taught them well within their system. And the Patriots do a lot of that. So, yeah, I expect somebody like Stuber to step up at some point and look well, in spite of the fact that I hate the Patriots' depth right now heading into training camp. It's one of the worst benches in football at the moment, but I expect that to change. So we'll see.
Right. And Will Sherman, let me just confirm for the Patriots fans that are the ghosts yelling at me right now, is still on the team. So just shout out Will Sherman. Way to go.
Yeah, we'll see how Sherman is. I don't want to give up on Sherman either. So, all right, let's talk about grades. What's your final grade on the Patriots?
Oh man, it's gonna be low. I can't go higher than a C+. I'm gonna go a C+ for New England. It's hard for me to say they're not at least going to be above average. We've tried so hard to avoid the PFF leaks for their ratings. I know I probably shouldn't even be plugging PFF. Someone that is a Patriots person on Twitter that I follow tweeted, not even the link to it, but tweeted like their own words about it. And I saw it. So I think they have them pretty highly rated, which I think is more based on, this is the Patriots. Oh, I know last year they had a good pass blocking grade because they do have good pass blockers, but I think their A is going to be, when you have both your guards leave, I think that's a big deal. You're starting a rookie. You're starting a guy who has only started 8 games last year. Trent Brown is a guy that I feel like could maybe fall off at any point. Mark Andrews getting a little bit older. Same with him. And again, I'm worried about the depth. Like you said, if one of these guys goes down for an extended period of time, it's not going to be great. One other thing that you and I have mentioned on this feed before when it comes to the Patriots, there's a weird coaching thing happening over there right now. They've lost a lot of coaches in the last couple of years. Right now, it's Bill Belichick, and obviously that man can do anything with it. I think he was taking snaps at OTAs as the center, like he was literally snapping the football. So maybe that's his plan. I don't know. But Matt Patricia and Joe Judge are like the assistant coaches, and like that's it. It's Belichick, it's those guys, and it's Belichick Jr. and that's the whole coaching staff. So I am a little bit worried. But again, it's the Patriots, so I have to give them a little bit of institutional credit. So I'm going to say C plus. Obviously, this could be the year when kind of takes off as a top 10 guy. Trent Brown could stay just as solid as he's always been. Cole Strange could be the best guard from this draft, and I could look silly, but I just don't love what I see. And until I see something different, I'm going to give him just a tick above average right now.
I think we found the third team now where I have a higher grade than you. So they're like needles in a haystack. Finally.
We're gonna have to go back and see who it is, because if it's all like Steelers rivals, I'm gonna lose a lot of credibility. It's not what I'm trying to do, people. I promise.
It was two teams in the same division, and I can't even remember who it was. It might have been the NFC. Yeah, I think it was the NFC East actually. But anyway, you already mentioned one reason why I have a lot of faith in the Patriots organization, but that's fading with every season that they just float around 500. My faith in their organization starts to dissipate a little bit. My respect for Belichick and what he's accomplished doesn't, but my faith in them as an organization moving forward, every year that they don't show up in the playoffs or that they don't seem to be able to get up above 500, and this could be another year just like that, I start to have a little bit less faith. So at the moment, I still have a pretty good amount of faith in this. I've got them rated in the B minus category. I really like their starting five. I'm not even sure about Cole Strange. I don't know what to think about Cole Strange. We'll put him in a box by himself, right? But outside of that, I think Trent Brown, I like him as a good solid tackle. I like David Andrews as an above average center. I like Mike Onwenu as a significantly above, a very good guard. I like Isaiah Wynn as a very good Pro Bowl possible kind of a tackle. And I think that covers it. But I like the starting five. And I have faith that the Patriots will find a couple of guys here, whether it's Stuber or Heron or Sherman, that they'll find a couple of guys to get some kind of depth this year if there are some injuries. Probably the B minus would be about the right place for me to settle in on them. But again, if Cole Strange struggles, if Trent Brown starts to show some age, this could fall apart really quickly because there's not a lot of depth here. There just isn't at the moment. There's just not.
But at least Mac Jones got skinny, so he can run around a little bit more, I guess. I guess that's the plan.
One or two injuries, he may have to. All right. Anything else on the Patriots before we move on?
Like I said, Patriots fans, I'm high on Andrew Stuber. So if you need to hear from me that I do feel some positivity about this group, and I'm not just being hater. I mean, the Patriots are like the Ravens for me, and I scoff when they draft because they do it. They get the sneaky good ones that you don't catch. Them getting Andrew Stuber, I think, could be a real game changer. So I'll give him a shout out for that.
Fair enough. All right, we'll see what the Patriots do this year, not only on the offensive line but everywhere else as well. That brings us to the Dolphins. The Dolphins have been bad on the offensive line for a long time. That's going to change this year. They're not going to be bad anymore. So let's talk about how good or how whatever they will be this year. But they're not going to be horrible this year, to say the least. Go ahead and give us a starting five. We'll start working our way through it.
So the starting five here is super interesting because up until OTAs, mini camps, and everything, it looked like they had signed Connor Williams to be their new left guard, which was great because that's been a revolving door for them the last couple of years. I mean, they had Austin Jackson try it out as his third position last year after failing at both tackle spots. But apparently they're trying him out at center. They really want that to work. Guys, I don't know the last time he played center. He played tackle in college. He's played guard in the NFL. But they're going to test it out. And I think it's so they can make room for their two young guys, Liam Eichenberg and Austin Jackson. So left to right, I have Teron Armstead, which is awesome. Liam Eichenberg, I think, is going to get that first crack at left guard. Connor Williams at center. Robert Hunt, the most steady guy from this group last year at right guard. And then I think they're going to try Austin Jackson again at right tackle. I think it's not so much a position battle, but Michael Dieter is a guy at center where I think they're just waiting for something to go wrong, whether it's they decide they can't have Eichenberg and Jackson on the field at the same time, or Williams can't pick up center in time for week 1, or he struggles with it the first few weeks. So I don't think it's a position battle. I think they want that group that I mentioned, Armstead, Eichenberg, Williams, Hunt, Jackson, to get the first crack and work. And if it doesn't, they'll bring Dieter in at center and then move the pieces around from there.
Totally agree with all of that. I'm going to start with Terran Armstead because he's the guy you write down his name in ink and you forget about it for the next 5 years. Okay. He's fantastic. He will be fantastic for a very long time, for as long as the Dolphins want him. They're paying him a whole heck of a lot of money to be fantastic. But that's okay. I guess if that's the direction they want to go, at least they are addressing the offensive line. You mentioned Connor Williams. I think Connor Williams is capable of learning to play center, but that's going to take time for him to get in stride. It might even take the entire season for him to get in stride. It might be next year before he really settles into that in terms of being what he can truly be. He's obviously going to be better at guard, but he's capable of playing center if they want him to. Liam Eichenberg, you mentioned the second-year guy. I think he's from Notre Dame. Is that correct? I can't remember for sure. Okay, yeah. I believe he's going to settle in at guard. I think he'll be fine. Maybe not great, but I think he'll work out. And then Robert Hunt at guard. I think Robert Hunt is a good, solid starting guard in this league. I think he'll be fine. The problem is Austin Jackson. Austin Jackson was a guy coming out of college that I absolutely loved. Loved him. The athleticism is there. The power is there. Everything is there. And yet he has done nothing. He has not even been average. He has been so far below average that really, but just based on what you've seen so far, he probably shouldn't even be on the field at all. And I don't mean to throw him down, but when you look at the talent level and when you look at the performance at the NFL level, it's a total opposite ends of the spectrum. And the problem is, if you want to take Austin Jackson off the field, who's going to play tackle? So, I mean, you basically have, I think, you have 4 guys who can play the guards in the center position. So you're all covered there. And Terran Armstead has got left tackle locked down. But if you want to pull Austin Jackson off the field, what do you do at tackle? And the Dolphins don't have an answer for that. They have a whole host of young guys, and we'll get into this in a minute. They have a whole host of young guys that they have hoped would work out, and they haven't. And so it really, Michael Dieter should be starting at center, and really Connor Williams should be plugged in at left guard, and you've already mentioned that. But then that still leaves, what do you do with Liam Eichenberg? Now Eichenberg's off the field, and Jackson's on the field. So I think you're right. I think this is the way that they get their young guys on the field, and maybe their most talented guys, and Michael Dieter is just there kind of as a backup. So I think you're right here about what's going on. It's not an easy puzzle to put together.
Yeah, and it's going to be really interesting. Mike McDaniel is the new head coach. He comes over being from the San Francisco 49ers Shanahan tree. So there was an interview with Eichenberg and his struggles from his rookie year and position changes and what they were doing. And apparently, from his standpoint, it's a completely different offense than what they were running before. It seems like it's going to be a lot more of a running scheme versus what they did last year, where it was a lot of the RPO style offense. If they get away from that, that can help, because I imagine RPO style offense would be a lot harder for young offensive linemen who are still getting used to the speed of the NFL. And now they're also wondering, is this a run or a pass? Do I need to get out and be aggressive right now? Do I need to hang back and not get an ineligible man downfield penalty? Getting really into the weeds here. I think what Dolphins fans want, what I've been reading on blogs and even some of our own stuff, is a lot of people want to see Robert Hunt play right tackle. I think it's something he's done in the past. But I think there's something about having that guy who's just so steady on your line that, okay, if this position has always been an issue, just put him there. And there's something to be said for that, especially now with Connor Williams in, because now what you can do is put Dieter at center, put Connor Williams at one of your guards, whether you want to flip Eichenberg over to right guard or, have Connor Williams play that, and then put Hunt at right tackle. I think that's what would be most likely to, at least that's what fans want. I won't say that's what's going to be most likely, because last year nobody expected Austin Jackson to play left guard for 13 games when he failed that tackle, and that's what happened. So you mentioned Eichenberg. I want to talk about him for a minute. You watch him and you like a lot of what you see, I think it's just a lot of physical limitations out there at tackle. Not a lot of foot speed, not a lot of length either. So even his punch doesn't get out quick. He can't keep guys off his body. I think guard will be really good for him. I think he'll be really good there. So I really hope they don't have to try to push him back to tackle, because I think that'll be a disservice to him. So I think fans would like to see Hunt at right tackle, but I'm with you on Jackson. The athleticism's there, but he just doesn't get good enough push in the run game. He falls off of blocks too often, balance, awareness issues, kind of all over the place. So it's tough. That's the question mark. We'll have to kind of see what happens throughout the season.
It's a very good point, and I'm not sure that you and Dolphins fans aren't right. If you can kick Hunt over to right tackle, and by the way, Austin Jackson probably has more talent, more athleticism than any other offensive lineman on the Dolphins, but it's not showing up on the field. And until it does, and maybe he needs to be in a different organization, maybe they just need to get him locked into one position, leave him there. I don't know, but until he does, maybe kicking Hunt over to right tackle and plugging Dieter in at center, and then moving Connor Williams back to his natural guard spot. That might very well be the answer. And I'm like you. I certainly don't want to see Eichenberg get kicked over to the tackle spot. I think that's one of the worst case scenarios to play out there. Let's talk about the depth. I mentioned Michael Dieter. He's the sixth man. After that, I don't see much. Okay, I see a lot of second-year guys, third-year guys. I see guys that have been drafted high. I see guys that have been drafted for the past 3 years. I see some rookie undrafted free agents here. I don't see much outside that top six. Anything different that I'm missing here?
I mean, so Solomon Kindley is a guy that started a couple games for them last year. And I mean, it's something. It's one of those things that as a fan, you like to see, because he is big, he is strong, he's a people mover in the run game. So for a group that has shown some, and I hate to use the word, but some softness overall, like, it's nice to at least have that guy that he's going to get out there and try to run somebody over, whether it works, whether he hits them, whether he gets a penalty, who knows, but he at least can do that, because he does struggle with some balance issues, especially in pass protection. But yeah, I mean, there's not a lot in here, man. There's not a lot in here. And I mean, I'm trying to this is how far into the barrel I'm digging here, even here in the moment. Is Austin Reeder still on this roster? I know he kind of came over midway through the season last year. I don't know if he made his way back on the roster or not.
I heard, he kicked back over to Kansas City. I'd have to dig up my file.
But and even then, we're talking about the guy who's like the third string center on the depth chart. So like, if that's what you got to hold on to, then it's a tough look.
Yeah, and I can call off the names here: Greg Little, Robert Jones, Michael Dieter, Solomon Kindley, Arnold Coleman, Kellen Deesh, Blaze Andrews, Cole Benwart, Adam Pankey. There are guys here with some talent. There are guys here who have been drafted high. There are guys here that the Dolphins have had hopes for. None of them have performed. Absolutely none of them. Outside of Michael Dieter being your sixth man, basically. None of these other guys have stepped up. Absolutely none of them. They don't even look good in backup roles. That's how poorly they have performed. Now, this is where I have a little bit of a problem with what the Dolphins. I don't say what the Dolphins have done, but I'll get to that in a second. They have drafted offensive linemen consistently. You and I have gotten onto so many teams for basically ignoring the offensive line in the draft. The Dolphins haven't done that for the past, 3-4 seasons now. They have drafted in the offensive line. They have invested draft picks in the line, and a couple of those guys have worked out, but for the most part, they haven't. Let me list off the names. Liam Eichenberg, 2001 second round. He's still kind of a wait and see. You and I both think that maybe he'll catch on at guard. Robert Hunt, 2020 second round. He's a no-doubter, lock starter at guard or wherever they decide to plug him. But then you get Austin Jackson. Huge hopes there, 2020 first round. Has done nothing to show that he should be on the football field so far. 2019 third round, Michael Dieter. I like him at center, but he's still in the upgradable category. He's not your no doubt starter. 2020 fourth round, Solomon Kindley. 21 seventh round, Arnold Coleman. None of these guys has stepped up higher than what they were drafted, and several of them have been lower than what they were drafted in terms of performance. And I don't think they've done a bad job drafting, because most of these guys were expected to be drafted in those areas. I think they've done a poor job developing these offensive linemen. We just talked about the Patriots and how they usually do a pretty good job of that. I think the Dolphins have generally not. Anything different on that?
No, I mean, yeah, you're right. They're making the investment, and you go through and yeah, you recall the names from when they were picked, and you're like, oh yeah, that was a good pick. Yeah, that was a good pick. But like continuously doesn't work out. And you even kind of see that across their board, across multiple positions, which is tough. The Austin Jackson pick, by the way, that was the Minka Fitzpatrick trade, so I think that worked out in Pittsburgh's favor. Um, here's the thing. I will let's spin this a little bit towards positivity. You like to see teams doing something different when something's not working out. So for as much as you and I sit here and can say draft offensive lineman every year, draft him every year, draft him every year, the Dolphins only had 4 picks in this year's draft because they traded a couple of them for Tyreek Hill, obviously. Then so they decided, okay, we're not that strong. We haven't been that strong at drafting and developing young guys. We have a lot of young guys. It's not working out right now. We only have 4 picks in this year's draft. Let's not mess around and try and go after another offensive lineman, especially not till, the 3rd round. Let's go out and spend money. They went out, they spent money. They got Teron Armstead. They got Connor Williams. Now, are those without their faults? No, because Armstead hasn't played a complete season in a really long time. They're going to take Connor Williams, who's a highly penalized player, and try to make him a center. So there's some question marks there with it. But in terms of trying to make that investment and fix that mistake, I mean, they're going for it. So I do, commend them for that. But this is the year that it probably has to work out, because if Williams and Armstead end up not living up to their expectation, you gave them all this money, and then you've got Dieter and Hunt, who are going to be free agents soon, and Eichenberg if he doesn't work out, Jackson if he gets cut by next year. You're looking at a complete tear down and rebuild of an offensive line, which is a long road. It's not fun to do.
Totally agree. Rock and a hard place here for the Dolphins. The Eagles have done this at the wide receiver room. They haven't been able to draft wide receiver in 20 years. We're talking, 2 completely different people in charge of that franchise, and they've always struggled to draft wide receivers. So now they're trading for one with the Titans. The Dolphins here, while it kind of feels like a Band-Aid, the money they spent here on offensive line and a wide receiver, it feels like they're trying to patch together a bad roster anyway. But in terms of what you just said, if you can't draft offensive linemen, or if the guys you draft you haven't been able to develop, and I think that's really the case here. I think they're drafting fine. I think they're just not developing them. If you're not developing them, then go ahead and go out and get a couple of guys that at least you think can be solid starters, if nothing else. Maybe you're overpaying for what you get, but whatever. At least you've tried to address the offensive line. You haven't ignored it. You've given yourself a chance here to compete on offense, and they've certainly done that. So I agree with you. Just zeroing in here on the offensive line and the draft situation. It's not like none of their draft picks have worked out, but certainly for the investment they've made from a draft pick standpoint, they should have a lot better offensive line than what they've had last year and this year.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, well, let's get into the grades. What's your final grade here on the Dolphins?
So all that we really, kind of laid into them pretty good. I think Teron Armstead at the very least, and Connor Williams, I think both those guys coming in is going to lift this group significantly. But I am going to factor in Teron Armstead's probably going to miss a handful of games. All right, so this isn't, you can't just take peak, Pro Bowl Teron Armstead and say this is who I'm getting for 17 games. He's never played a full season. From 2014 on, when he became the full-time starter at left tackle in New Orleans, he played 14 games, 13, 7, 10, 10, 15, 14, and 8. So I have to factor in, okay, he'll be around, and he's just turned 30 last season. So as an offensive lineman, look at Trent Williams. This guy could still be around for a while, but I'm going to have to factor in, he's probably going to miss 4 or 5 games at least every year. So I have to factor that in. But Connor Williams, I like him as a talent. I have to factor in a new position. I have to factor in the Jackson situation and what they're doing there. I'm going to go with a C-. I don't think this is going to be a bad group, like you said at the top, which is everything below a C-. I think there's too much talent, and I think Mike McDaniel is going to put something good together, even if he just figures out how to cover up for a poor offensive line better than they have in the past. But I don't think this is an average group. I think this is a below average group with high, ceiling type players, but a low ceiling in terms of what they can do overall together based on the total talent roster that they have.
We have found the 4th team in which I have a higher you.
All right, look at this.
But
And you were meaner than I was during that whole explanation. Look at that. This is great.
Yeah, I was. Hey, welcome to cold water, right? But you've talked me into lowering my grade.
Oh, okay. There you go.
I was going to come flat C. Which, by the way, I love. If I'm a Dolphins fan, if I look at the lines that I've had to put up with for the past 5 years or 4 years, whatever it is, yes, give me that C level, competitive, average offensive line all day. I'll take it. I'll jump on that in a heartbeat. But I think I was factoring in Pro Bowl Terran Armstead. And your point, I'll bet you a lot of fans outside the Dolphins fans couldn't tell you what you just said about Terran Armstead. He's never played a full season. And in fact, he often misses half a season. So if you factor that in, oh, by the way, he's probably not going to be there for 4 or 5 games. Well, now the offensive line starts to fall apart. And there's not enough else in the offensive line that I'm convinced is going to be able to hold up. So I think Eichenberg can catch on at guard eventually. It might be the season, it might not. Connor Williams, depending on where they put him. Is he going to play catch up at center all year? Robert Hunt, I like. Mentioned Austin Jackson. I'm gonna drop off of my flat C to a C minus here, and there's no depth. At the moment, there's no depth at all. Is there talent? Yes, but none of that talent, other than Michael Dieter, has shown that they belong in a football field. Absolutely none of them, out of the guys on the bench. So, even as much as we've torn them apart here, if I'm a Dolphins fan, I'm very, very, very thankful to have this brand new offensive line that I'm looking at. So
if you can have just about an average offensive line like that, right. The word average, it means average. It sounds bad. We want to have an elite, a top 5, all these buzzwords that we hear around everywhere. If you have an average group, that's pretty good, because most of the offensive linemen in the NFL are average players. They're not great. They're not bad. They're just they go out there and you know what to expect. They give up a couple pressures. They miss a couple blocks, but for the most part, they do their job. And I think that's what this offensive line will do, as long as, they don't ask Austin Jackson to play left tackle, or, Robert Hunt can really cover up a lot of what he does on the right side if they're playing next to each other, or he ends up on the bench at some point. If one of those 3 things can happen, then, they'll be all right.
Totally agree. What you said about average is 100% true. And there's a lot of teams that make the playoffs and even win Super Bowls with somewhat average offensive lines. The point of the offensive line these days is to give you a chance to compete. And as long as the offensive line is doing that, and I think this Dolphins offensive line can do exactly that, gives you a chance to compete, then you can start to look elsewhere to upgrade different spots on the roster. And I think the Dolphins offensive line can do that this year. So, Dolphins fan, I'm very, very happy with what I see, based off of what I've been having to look at the past few years, for sure.
Yeah, if you Dolphin fans stuck around to the grades in this part, congrats. We're proud of you for making it through and not shutting us off, because overall we're happy with it. We're fine. We'll be all right.
Totally agree. We have looked at some really horrible offensive lines this offseason, and they are not yours. Okay, it'd be very.
It could be worse.
Speaking of lines that have been bad in the past and look a whole lot better now, brings us to the Jets, the final team in this division. So go ahead and give us your starting 5.
Yeah, this is really fun. I mean, the 5 guys are for sure solid. You know exactly who you're getting. The sides at which they're being placed have flip-flopped a couple times over the course of the offseason. But right now, the way it's settling is from left to right: George Fant, Laken Tomlinson, Connor McGovern, Elijah Vera Tucker, Mekhi Becton. Now it looked like the left and right side were going to be completely flipped earlier in the offseason, because George Fant played more right tackle during the season. Mekhi Becton was obviously a left tackle. Elijah Vera Tucker played left guard last year. But I think Laken Tomlinson coming over and primarily playing left guard for his career, I think that kind of factored in everything, because Fant played some left tackle after Mekhi Becton got hurt. He might have actually played a majority left tackle at that point, but they wanted Vera Tucker and Becton next to each other. So if Tomlinson was going to be on the left side, they wanted to put, I think, Vera Tucker and Becton on the right side. I think that's where that factor came in. But those 5 guys is going to be the group for sure. And I think that'll be the order: Fant, Tomlinson, McGovern, Vera Tucker, Becton.
And I 100% agree with you, and that's excellent. I didn't know that about them wanting to put Vera Tucker next to Becton, so that's excellent homework. Had no clue about that. I really like this starting five. Now, do I think that they're going to be dominant? The answer is no. I don't think that at all. But I don't. Almost every offensive line we've looked at, the starting five has some kind of at least one guy who's a weakness. I don't really see that with this starting five. Maybe George Fant, but George Fant is fine at left tackle. He's somewhere between, depending on what day it is, a good solid starter and the starter you might think about upgrading at tackle. That's where Fant is. But you're fine there. Mekhi Becton is still struggling in pass protection, but I think he'll catch on. And even if he doesn't, he's still good enough to be a starting tackle in this league. I don't think there's any question about it. You mentioned Connor McGovern at center. I think McGovern is an above-average center in the NFL. And then you have the guards with Vera Tucker and Laken Tomlinson. Tomlinson's a stud there at left guard. And then maybe Vera Tucker is the weakness. I don't know, but I think he's fine there at guard too. To me, I like this starting five. Do you feel the same?
Yeah, I do. So I have McGovern as kind of the weak link.
Okay.
Personally, I like what Fant showed last year. Becton is the inconsistent one, right? He's kind of the wild card. His good is great and his bad is ugly. Vera Tucker and Tomlinson. Shout out to the Jets. We've had a really fun time this offseason taking teams that traditionally just make such poor decisions and have just made smart moves. So how many years ago was it when the Jets took their big free agent money and signed future boxer Le'Veon Bell and thought that was going to fix everything for them, and now their big free agent move, they go get Laken Tomlinson, a guard, an interior offensive lineman from San Francisco. Like, that just doesn't happen. But I think it completes this group, because even if I think McGovern is the quote unquote weak link, if he's between Tomlinson and Vera Tucker, and I think Vera Tucker is a stud and can be a very good guard in this league, it looks a lot better if you're between those two guys than if you're between, Joe Schmo and whoever else. So I think this is going to be a good group. Like you said, no world beaters, but I think this is a good offensive line.
Agreed. And by the way, you mentioned about good decisions. I was going to say it if you didn't. Joe Douglas, as the general manager here of the Jets, if they'll leave him alone and not meddle with him, just leave him alone. I can't promise he'll win you a Super Bowl there in New York for the Jets, but he will keep this roster competitive. He will have you in the playoffs. And even in a tough AFC, maybe not this year, it's a brutal AFC this year. But if they'll leave him alone for the next 5 to 8 years, he will have this Jets team in the playoffs on a rather consistent basis and give them a chance to be a whole lot more consistent than they have ever been in their entire franchise history. Just be more consistently good year in and year out. And again, I'm not saying that Douglas can take them all the way to a Super Bowl. That's a big ask, right? You got to get the quarterback position right, and you got to get the coach right and all that. But his decisions have been good. And if they'll just leave him alone and not meddle with him and interfere too much, Joe Douglas is going to get the job done here in New York. And by getting the job done, I mean they're going to be consistently good for a very long time because his decision-making is good. From free agents to drafting, it's a good body of work that he's put together. Really, really impressed with it.
Yeah, 100% agree with everything you said. We love the whole team building process and what it looks like. You have the Bills process from this era where it's been, they look at one position group at a time and completely overhaul it, and that's really fun. You look at the Rams and just who are the biggest, best names that we can get every single year. That's fun. And the Jets have been just kind of, steady Eddie. They're not trying to do too much. They're getting just the best player they can at each step of the way. So whether it's an offensive lineman here and a cornerback there, or a receiver here and your quarterback there, like they're just going, nice and slow and steady. And it's nice to see for once. And like you said, it's hard to do that because ownership is, impatient traditionally, and we'll see. They're going to have to do something this year. They're not going to have to win the Super Bowl, I don't think, but they can't be, a 2 or 4 or 5 win team again if we're going to hope to see Joe Douglas kind of survive this, like you're saying.
I think if Joe Douglas doesn't survive it, I think he gets picked up somewhere else almost immediately by some other better franchise. I hate to put it that way, Jets fans, but I do think Douglas is. I think people recognize around the league that Douglas is capable of making good decisions in spite of impatience from ownership and maybe even some metalness from ownership. I like their bench too. So let me tell you who I got on the bench. I've got Connor McDermott, who I think if he were a starter on a good offensive line, he would be fine. If you put him on a bad offensive line, he probably gets dragged down to the not very good area. He's somewhere between a backup and an upgradable starter at the tackle spots. Dan Feeney, I like as a backup. I don't like him as a starter, but as a backup, coming in, give him 2 to 4 games in case of an injury break. Feeney, I like him. He's tough. Nate Herbig. Nate Herbig is a guy, I think, at guard who could start for a lot of teams in the NFL. I don't think he's going to start for the Jets this year, but I know you could put Herbig on the Seahawks, on the Bears, on the Texans. He could start right away, be an instant upgrade. And I think, for more teams than just that. So I like that. And then they've got the rookie Max Mitchell, who's in his, the rookie Max Mitchell, who's a 4th rounder. He's in the mix. They go about 8 or 9 deep here. So I like their depth too. It's not as good as the Bills' depth, but I like their depth here too. Anybody else you want to throw in the mix there?
Oh yeah, those are the names. I mean, Nate Herbig. We have praised the Philadelphia Eagles and their offensive line. He's been a contributor there for a couple of years. I think 17 starts in the last 2 seasons over there. So that's really good when you can get it. If that's your kind of swing guard, and then Max Mitchell, I really like. That Louisiana Lafayette Raging Cajun offensive line, if you can grab a guy out of there in the mid rounds, I think next year they're going to have somebody too. They've had some guys in the last couple of years that are nice prospects, can do a lot of things. I think he played tackle there. I think he also is a guy that projects better at guard, but just a good overall player. I think those 2 guys, and you mentioned, Connor McDermott as your veteran swing tackle that you can rely on right away. But I think those guys with Max having some position flex, Herbig having some experience with a really good offensive line are 2 guys that could step in right away if you need at any of these spots, considering we like every single one of these starters. So if you just have to fill in kind of in one spot at a time, you're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, so I really like the depth. It's not fantastic. It's not like these guys would just come in and dominate, but there's not a huge drop off here. These are guys that you have confidence in stepping in and playing. Again, it's not about looking up online and seeing that they've started a lot. It's like when you break down the tape a little bit, you realize these guys can kind of hold their own. Maybe not over the course of 16 games, 17 games now, but for short periods of time, these guys can step into a decent offensive line like the Jets have, and they can hold their own. I am interested, before we hit the grades, where do you ultimately land on Mekhi Becton? Because coming out of college, I loved him. And yet now we've started to see some flaws and some injury too. The injury obviously is hindering his growth, no question about it. But based after what you've seen so far, where do you land on Mekhi Becton at the moment?
I'm still really high on him. That can easily change after 2 weeks. I think seeing what he looks like coming back from that injury last year, because even that first game last year against the Panthers, you go back and watch that. His athleticism is still there despite, the couple injuries he had as a rookie. So, I mean, the guy is, this is just Pro Football Reference, so who knows how accurate, but he's listed at 6'7", 363 pounds, and he can move, man. He was on the second level and not just out there, but it's such a different skill to be that big, not only get to the second level, but actually make contact with somebody. To be on balance and actually get a good block and not just kind of be running in the way is really, really impressive. And as long as he gets his technique in, and I think this was an improvement he made from his rookie year to what we would have seen last year if he was healthy. But in that game, he showed really good technique in pass pro. With those guys that are really big, you tend to see them bend a little bit too much because they can't move their feet quite enough. He was moving his feet all right, so he wasn't bending, and he was still able to use his length, those long arms. So as long as that injury doesn't hinder that athleticism that he still had last year, I think he's still really good. And if you put him next to Elijah Vera-Tucker for a full season, those guys are going to be just like maulers, and it's going to be It's gonna be a lot of fun to watch.
I 100% agree with everything you said, and I think based off of what you just said, I could spend the next hour and easily double this videotape here. I won't do that, but you did mention for tackles getting to the second level, there is a huge difference, and we see it all the time when we break down the tape between a guy who just gets to the second level and he's just kind of out there in the way versus what a guy like Mekhi Becton does. He's fast enough to get there, and then he blasts somebody. He will get to wherever he intends to go, and he will knock them completely off the ball. And we're not talking just at the line of scrimmage now. We are talking about moving to the second level and being able to catch linebackers and defensive backs and actually block them completely out of the way. He does that. There's a huge difference. We have seen so many tackles who can get to the second level and they block nobody. They don't even get a hand on anybody. But Becton does, and that's a huge, huge, huge difference. So in the running game, he's dominant. I think he's already dominant. It's his pass protection. But you mentioned he's got the quick feet. So it's just a matter of staying healthy and then developing the technique that you said you already seen flashes of. So I think Becton, even if they decide for some reason they don't want to keep him at tackle in future years, maybe this guy can move over to guard. He's that quick. He can do all kinds of things. But I think he'll be fine at tackle. Maybe not left tackle. We'll see. But if they keep him at right tackle, I think he lands on his feet. I think he does well.
Yeah, and that's the thing, being at right tackle this year. And I did go back and double check, and George Fant did take over left tackle right after Becton got hurt. So that probably factored in as well. But I think it was more the Tomlinson thing becoming in. But anyways, yeah, I think that's a good point. That at right tackle, depending on how New York is going to play it this year, he might not have as much of that pass pro kind of requirement that he would have had. Now we are seeing in today's NFL, left, right side doesn't really matter. You got guys rushing from everywhere now. But still, in certain offenses, it does still make a difference. And for a young quarterback in Zach Wilson, having that blind side protected maybe by a George Fant, who's a little more technically sound as a pass protector, and have Mekhi Becton being there on the right side could benefit for sure.
Simon, you were playing all my favorite notes tonight, man. Okay. What you just said about how we're seeing edge rushers come from both sides these days, that is 100% right. Over the past 3 to 5 years in the NFL, they're not just coming from the left side anymore. Now, offensive line hasn't caught up to that yet. Most of the best tackles in football are still on the left side. And that comes from 50 years ago when they wanted to kind of protect the quarterback's blind side because all these guys are pocket passers. But in today's NFL, so many of these quarterbacks don't necessarily have a blind side because they're in shotgun, because they're so mobile. They quickly curl out to the right. I'm not sure as an edge rusher, I wouldn't want to be on the right side, the right-handed side, to be in the face of these mobile quarterbacks. And in response to that, I'm not sure I don't want my best tackle on the right side to kind of play up against that. But we could talk about that all night. So feel free to hit that or not hit that.
Last thing I'll say is TJ Watt likes being up against the right tackle. So I'll just leave it. I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, exactly.
All I'll say.
All right. Well, I'm sure Jets fans are eager to hear our grade on them. So go ahead and give us your offensive line grade for New York.
So I'm coming in at a B- for the Jets, and I think this is a starting point. I always say for all of these grades, like this could go up. This could, like, George Fant could just build on what he did last year. Elijah Vera Tucker could get even better. Laken Tomlinson could come in and be that, missing piece to this group. He was one of the better linemen for that 49ers group last year. And now he's coming in as kind of, maybe he's going to be the third or fourth best guy on that group. We'll see. Becton, a whole year healthy, could be a huge difference. So this could go up. I went back again and looked at some of my other grades. Obviously, the Bills I just gave a B to. They're not quite on that B+ level as the Chiefs or Cowboys. I don't think I have this Jets group quite there. I don't have them quite at the same. I don't think they have that guy as good as a Deion Dawkins. I don't think they have quite that same depth. But B- is 2 ticks above average. And I think if you told a Jets fan last year that, hey, next year this offensive line is going to be 2 ticks above average, they'd be pretty ecstatic. So B minus, definitely room for growth though, but I like this group overall.
I agree. I've got a B minus on the Jets as well. They're starting 5. I don't necessarily identify an obvious weak point. I mentioned Barrett Tucker at the start, but I didn't mention that, and you did. He's only in the 2nd season, so for a rookie, he looks fantastic. You expect him to get better, so it's really it would be unfair to say he's even a potential weak point. I think he might become the strong point, basically, when you're looking at how good he looked as a rookie and you're filtering in the growth factor. So you're 100% right on Barrett Tucker. I like the starting 5. None of them look like a huge injury risk except for Becton possibly, but we've only got 1 season there of injury. These guys are ready to go on the starting 5. They've got, I think, 3 to 4 guys that can come in and play. I've got a B minus here. And for Jets fans who have looked at horrible offensive lines last year wasn't awful, but last year wasn't good. They've looked at horrible offensive lines now for a long time. This is fantastic. This looks good for the future. This looks good for next year, 2022. I love it. I'm right there to B minus.
Yeah, absolutely. Future's bright too. That's a good point. Yeah. I think most of these guys, if not all, are under 30. So that's exciting.
Yeah, I agree. They've been drafting. They haven't thrown a lot of money at the offensive line, but they've brought in veterans to play some of the depth spots who don't cost a lot, but who can obviously be on the field. They're not just filling in a spot. They obviously deserve to be on the field in some fashion. So I really like what they're doing here. Anything else about the Jets or the AFC East in general?
I think the Seahawks would like to have George Fant back.
Yeah. It depends on I like their 2 young tackles. I really do.
That's right. That's true. Yeah. All right. I think that's it.
All right, everybody, if you're still watching, thank you so much for being with us. We've got one more offensive line video to do. We'll do that here in just a little bit. You can catch Simon Short on the Simon Short podcast on Apple or Spotify. You can catch both of us on whatever YouTube platform you're watching right now, whether it's the sports and money side of things or whether it's the Phantom Sports side of things. You can catch us on the Phantom Sports website where they have tons of articles about football. As the football season gets closer, those articles will crank up more than ever, but they also have all other kinds of sports there as well. So I encourage you to check that out. I will give a shout out to Joey, our videographer at Phantom Sports, who makes us look a whole lot better than we've ever been before. Thank you so much for being with us. Bye.